Hey kids, as you know, we live in the wonderful state of Montana, which is the fourth largest state in the country we call the United States of America. Montana, despite its population being on the lower end of the spectrum, has a very deep and extensive history that changed the United States in a myriad of different ways. Like, did you know that the copper industry in Butte was one of the first industrialized businesses in the world? I sure didn't, but this video isn't about the copper boom, it's about our railroads, which we have a lot of. Are a lot of them out of commission? Yeah. But are they still cool to learn about? That's subjective, but I need a grade, so we're going to talk about them anyways. Our story begins on Manada Pass on May 9th, 1880, where the first rails were laid by the Utah Northern Railway Company, which was formerly under the jurisdiction of Sidney Dillon. The person the town we are currently in was named after. The Utah Northern Railway Company was a subsidiary of the Union Pacific Railroad Company, which is the railroad company I always rooted for when the whole race between the two major railroad companies was happening. The first rails were laid in Manada Pass as the railway company was moving up through Wyoming. The railway company's objective was to make a debut, which they actually accomplished in just under 2 years, which is pretty impressive for the time and place, and as you could all guess, this railway eventually led to Butte rapidly industrializing. After the completion of the Monida to Butte route, the Utah Northern Railway Company decided we need an extra 57 miles of railroad, so they expanded it to a town called Garrison, a town founded earlier that same year, and Garrison was later declared as the endpoint for the Utah Northern Railway Company's endeavors. The Utah Northern Railway Company's railroad ended up being one of the longest narrow gauge railroads ever built, spanning 466 miles. Despite never lengthening their railroad any further, they actually did widen the railroad quite a bit in 1887. They widened the 3-foot narrow gauge railroad to 4.5 feet and 8 inches. They actually widened all 466 miles of this road in a single day by having a bunch of dudes just line up across the entire thing and get into work, which is pretty dang cool if you ask me. While all this was happening, the newly founded nation of Canada had some rich coal deposits being mined up in old Alberta. The Americans heard about this and were like, hey, can we have some? Scratch my back and I'll scratch yours. And Canada was all like, sure man, let's connect railroads. And so we did, and by 1890, Great Falls, Montana had 2 railroads running through it. The one owned by the Alberta Railway and Coal Company was narrow gauge, and the one owned by the Great Falls Railway Company was standard gauged. This was eventually changed in September of 1902 when the Alberta Railway and Coal Company decided it was time to make the railway standard gauge, with reconstruction being completed on January 1st, 1903. At this point, you may be wondering, what about the Native Americans? Didn't they get completely screwed over? To which I'd say, yes, my curious apprentice, but lo, all of that screwing over you're thinking about occurred 30 years before Montana was even granted statehood. Except for the Northern Cheyenne being forced to cede 5,000 acres to railroad companies in 1900, but honestly, 5,000 acres isn't much compared to how big their reservation actually is, so that gets a pass. Now we're moving down south to Old Anaconda. Anaconda was originally founded in 1883 by Marcus Daly under the name of Copperopolis. Copperopolis was changed to Anaconda after discovering there was already a town called Copperopolis, so the Postmaster General at the time, Clinton Moore, recommended that he named it Anaconda for whatever reason. I legitimately couldn't find anything explaining why our pal Clinton Moore told Marcus Daly to name his town Anaconda of all things, but whatever. Maybe he really liked that song by Sir Mix-a-Lot. Soon after founding Anaconda, Marcus Daly founded the Anaconda Mining Company, which began mining copper and silver deposits around Butte, a rapidly industrializing city just 24 miles away. After realizing Butte had an incredible abundance of natural resources, Butte was soon coined the richest hill on Earth. With the discovery of these rich veins and valuable materials, Marcus Daly created the Butte, Anaconda, and Pacific Railway, with the first train rolling into Anaconda on December 26, 1893, just a year after construction of the Butte Anaconda Railroad actually started, and Anaconda went on to be very prosperous thanks to this railroad. Rewinding a bit, this next bit takes place in 1870s North Dakota. During the construction of Northern Pacific Railway, construction was halted for a whole 7 years due to financial struggle in 1873. However, in 1880, the Northern Pacific Railway's construction would soon continue thanks to some financial help from a man named Frederick Billings, whom the city of Billings, Montana is named after. Now that the Northern Pacific Railway's construction was resumed, they wanted to reach the west as quickly as possible, so they teamed up with the Oregon Railway and Navigation Company in hopes to meet them somewhere in the middle, which ended up happening on September 8, 1893 in Gold Creek, Montana. To celebrate this feat, they held a Golden Spike ceremony with President Ulysses S. Grant being present, and with that, the Northern Pacific Railway was the first transcontinental route in Montana Territory. Our next story begins with our good friend James Hill. Now, James was a Canadian-born man with a buddy who went to the U.S. from time to time, and he frequently heard that the United States was abundant in good land and clean water. This inspired him to visit the United States, and he ended up in Butte after hearing about its silver boom. While in Butte, he befriended Marcus Daly. Despite James being ambitious regarding railroads, him and Marcus Daly didn't really collaborate on any construction projects together, which is strange considering Marcus is pretty experienced with railroads and towns and all that good old West stuff. James Hill ended up constructing a road just west of Havre in 1890. The lines were placed through Montana and Idahoan Rockies, and it eventually passed through fields in eastern Washington until being completed in 1893 in Seattle. James started constructing another line in Lewistown in an attempt to have it reach New Rockford in South Dakota, but it was never completed due to economic struggles. Quite a shame, really. Anyways, the railroad that James built that reached Seattle is called the Great Northern Railway and is considered to be Montana's second transcontinental railroad. Our final story is about Montana's third and final transcontinental railroad called the Milwaukee Road. This one starts a little later, with it taking place just after the turn of the century. Quite frankly, this road has quite a chaotic history to the point where it's downright stupid. Firstly, they started surveying the route they were going to build on before there was any approval of the project by the government. Second, this road was 2,300 miles long, and they somehow completely missed every town that would grant this road any sort of profitability. Lastly, it was built without any land grants. So straight up, they just said, hey, we're going to build this. Screw all of you. We don't care if you go broke. See ya. And they went on their merry little way. After some time, they realized just how dumb of an idea this was, so they built branches along the railroad so the railroads would connect to towns so that profit would actually be garnered. But even then, they didn't build enough branches that they had hoped to build. As highways started coming around, a lot of this railroad's branches were put completely out of commission by 1980, which, all things considered, it lasted a lot longer than I would have thought. The only part of this railroad that is still being utilized connects to a railroad called the Soo Line, which is owned by some railroad company in Canada. So remember, kids, if you're going to build a railroad, don't do what the Milwaukee Road did, because they did pretty much everything wrong. Till next time, see ya.